Hey, folks. Welcome to the patron live stream, where I start off by reminding you that if you toss me a buck on Patreon, you are the customer. If you're listening for free, you are the product. So please give me some shekels, goy. But on to the topic of this live stream. We are going to be discussing addicts in this one, because specifically because I just got an addict out of my life. I missed doing the Patreon live stream last weekend because of the just the garbage that you wind up dealing with, and so this is my catch up for that. And I have Ru as a reader here, who used to live in Los Angeles, so he knows a thing or two about addicts. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing?
Pretty good. And as you can see, we got a double dose of me here. I'm broadcasting from my computer, but using my cell phone for the damned audio. So hopefully it will work this time. Now, I'd like to start off by introducing, like, what are we talking about? Because, Forney and I were discussing gamma males just offline. We were just chatting about this. And Forney had a recent post that he put up on Facebook saying that, like, the war is not between the X and the Y. The war is between people that accurately perceive reality and those that absolutely refuse to. And this is, so if we, when you talk about all of the freaks and weirdos and monsters out there, yeah, a very large number of them are gamma males. But if you just start calling everybody a gamma male, soon it loses all meaning. It's people that won't acknowledge reality, won't deal with objective truth, that constantly live in delusions. And the addict is a person like this. Yeah, and I'd further state that an addict is not necessarily, like, when you think addict, you think alcoholic, or you think drug addict, or what have you. There's an old saying that I really like. Never trust a man who can't get laid. And the implication of that is that the guy who can't get laid, who is presumably thinking about getting laid all the time, see, that guy right there is another addict. He is addicted to the sex he's not having. And you can't trust the addict. The addict they will screw you over at the drop of the hat. They will be extremely inconsistent in everything they do. They're just really destructive people to be around. You got anything you want to add to that?
Well, you're bang on about what you just said, comparing the mentality of an addict to a gamma. And I'm not really a huge fan of the Vox Day hierarchy. I like it. I just think that people kind of obsess over it too much and try to impose it on every possible dynamic between people, and I don't necessarily think that's always applicable. There's more gray areas there than I think most people would like to admit. But yeah, the addict kind of lives in a world of his own narrative, just the way a gamma would. Everything in their worldview has to conform. It has to fit inside the box of first being an addict, then everything else.
Yeah, when it comes to all of these labels, like, these are labels that we're putting into place to try and help us perceive the universe better. It's not a foundational building block of the universe. Okay, like, gamma is not a character class, basically, and neither is addict. And so, what an addict is are going to vary, but you can be addicted to absolutely anything. Somebody can be addicted to social media, to narcissism, to.
And I think an important distinction to make is that there are degrees. Whereas it's not like, and this is one of the things I don't like about programs like AA, they see it as very binary, when the reality typically is a lot more gray than that. They say, oh, if you're an addict, you're an addict, or you're either an addict or you're not an addict. When I think, in my personal experience, there is a gray area there. It's maybe not the easiest thing to navigate, but I don't believe that it's so black and white.
Yeah, you can walk back. I think you can. You can walk back from being an addict. And yeah, like, addict is not, it's no more like an absolute character class than gamma male. is a character class. And, you know, I'm not saying AA doesn't work. In fact, it's actually an impossible question asking if any of these treatment programs work. Because at the end of the day, the person needs to be willing to help themselves. And shoot, I forgot to put it in the comments, but Quintus Curtius had a podcast this morning about, you know, don't expect too much from other people. Okay? And this is very much the same with the addict. You know, you really get into this whole free will determinism question. Can they get better? Do they want to get better? What works? It's really, really hard to say. And so what we're going to do, break down, yeah, you might see it in the crotch bar there, the eight points describing the addict and what we can learn from this person, what we can do, how like we can not be that and we can be something better in our own lives. So I'd say the first point, number one, and this is the biggest thing with the addict, is they refuse to take responsibility for any of their decisions.
Absolutely true.
You know what? They are constantly looking for an excuse in the morning. Listen, I think just about none of us wants to be held accountable for everything we've screwed up in life. You know, if you got a ticket for every single time you didn't see a school zone, and if every time that, like, if you got busted for everything you've done legally and morally, you know, we'd all be 6 feet underground. So
just like if every beta thing you've ever done when you were in high school was defining you now, you'd be a sexless virgin.
Yes. Yeah, and we would, you know, we want forgiveness. We want, you know, it's like, oh, I can't believe I did that last night. That was really stupid. So that's all. But the difference between us and the addict, the difference is that the addict won't even acknowledge to themselves that they did something. You know, let me give you an example of this. There's a term Indian giving, which, you know, while I've run into a lot of Indians doing it, it's mainly Indians who are addicts.
I miss the days when that was still like a word I could say on this, you know, playground, you know, and then it didn't get, you know, you didn't get crucified for it. Oh, the 90s.
Yeah. So Indian giving, the core mechanism of this is, first of all, you want to act like you're the big man. Look at me, I'm rich, I'm going to buy stuff for all of my friends. You know, as soon as you get paid, I'm going to buy drinks for everybody. And then the next day, you say, well, you owe me money for drinking. Or you steal something from them because they owe you, right? You're entitled to their stuff. Because like the next day, you're like, oh, geez, I just spent $100 at the bar. You know, I don't have $100. I have bills to pay. So now you try and start mooching it off of the people that you bought it for.
They're scorekeepers, basically.
Yeah, the Indian giving is the fake scorekeeper. Look, I'm going to give you something for free that you don't even want, and then I'm going to demand that you pay me for it the next day. So that right here you have this failure to take responsibility. That, yes, I did something stupid, and, you know, they don't come to you and say, oh man, I spent too much money. Could you lend me some money so I can pay my phone bill? I was a real ass last night. No, they don't do that. They don't ask for mercy. They don't take responsibility for what they did. They say, you owe me. They were entitled to do that irresponsible thing, and they shouldn't have to pay any consequences.
Yeah, well, another angle of that is like they won't ever, like, let's say you're out with them and a normal person might pick up the tab just because they can and they want to be nice or whatever. These people will never do that. Never. I mean, there's a crossover here between like narcissists and addicts, and there's a lot of like common territory there. And I'm saying these kinds of people will quantify everything that they give out in order to get something back. There's no such thing as just giving for the sake of it or because you can or whatever.
Yeah, they're giving. They will buy something for you when you don't want them to show that they're bigger than you, that they're more powerful than you. And then the next day, instead of admitting weakness, because there is this narcissistic element where they have to be powerful. They have to act like they're in control, even when they're completely out of control.
And it's pretty much obvious to everyone else when they're out of control, but they're the last people to see it. And it's the same thing with an addict.
Oh God, they are absolutely pathetic. Everybody that sees them is either laughing at them or afraid that they're going to react, like they're going to freak out or something. And they're completely unaware of the fact
It's
that
either
they're
pity or disdain that
yeah,
people have for them.
they're an absolute clown and they don't even realize it. All right, well, okay,
Or they're just a pity case. But yeah, go on. I don't mean to hang you up on this point.
the next point I wrote is class envy and resentment. And this is somewhat related to what we were just saying about Indian giving, is that the addict loves to engage in class envy. The addict I just got out of my life was working at a job making, well, he managed to get 3 jobs in 3 months because he kept getting himself fired. And he was making damned good money at all of these jobs. And if he could have, gone more than 2 weeks without ruining his working life, if he could have not blown his entire paycheck, if he could have just not constantly been trying to cheat at everything, he could have been, he could go somewhere in life. But he's not going to do that. And he blames all the problems on this class envy.
That might have been his own way of dealing with that shit. I don't think class envy is necessarily a trait of an addict, although it certainly is common in a lot of them.
Yes, it's certainly not going to be ever. The lower class ones are going to make a lot of excuses for why they're poor. So it's not necessarily class envy, it's envy of people that aren't broken like them. Right? And so if there's somebody that's worked hard and saved their money, they'll say, well, that person's they're just born that way and they're lucky and it's okay if I steal from them. Yeah, if somebody else can drink responsibly without getting blackout drunk, they'll say, oh, you're not like me, you're just born. They blame other people for their failings.
Well, yeah, you'll get no argument from me on that one.
Honestly, the reason I included it isn't so much that it's a general attitude of addicts, but just that class envy is such a toxic thing. Whether it's class envy or if it's envy between the sexes, you get a lot of guys that they take their first red pill and they're like, oh man, girls have it so much easier. Like, dude, you don't have to bleed once a month. How about you count your damn blessings? The envy is just such an incredibly destructive emotion. So it's not that they feel that addicts feel class envy, but they will usually feel some sort of envy. That person, they have an easy life.
Absolutely.
So it's okay if I lie, cheat, and steal to get my way because I was just born this way, and it's not fair.
Well, yeah, I mean, addiction is such a dark thing that you'd give your left nut to be in anyone else's shoes when you're in the throes of it, So I don't, I don't blame them for feeling envious of someone who's not in their position. In fact, I'll tell you this. I used to kind of frequent some forums for addicts, and a lot of the people in there direct a lot of vitriol at quote unquote conservatives. Because they feel they're entitled to all kinds of treatment and be treated as a health issue rather than a criminal issue, etc.
You know what? Let's jump to point number 4 and skip 3 for now. This is the next one I was going to mention. Addicts are always asking for help. All the time. And it's completely fits with what you just said, that a lot of them dislike conservatives. I think it's partly because conservatives, they look at that son of a bitch with his new car and his wife and kids, and look at him. He's so entitled. He's so whatever. When the irony is that no, he's not entitled. That's why he earned that stuff. You are entitled, and you think you deserve it for free. And addicts, they are always asking for help. They're either asking you to help them with their bills, or they're asking you for advice on how to get clean, etc.
They're always one step away or one whatever unit away from like a great idea, and they just need you to help them get there, basically.
Yes. And see, now what I discovered with my addict was that the advice I had been giving him, every single one of his friends had been giving him the exact, almost word for word, the same damned advice. And so, by me trying to help this guy, by me trying to give this guy advice and wasting my lifeblood on this, I'm actually not helping him. I'm enabling him.
Yes. Basically, when dealing with someone like this, who's actually in the throes of active addiction, not like a recovering addict, you kind of have to understand that the entity that you're dealing with isn't really a person. I mean, they are a person, but they're not acting. They're not in control of their actions and their decisions. I'm not trying to make an excuse for them. They're still responsible for everything they do, but they're controlled by, you could call, a dark energy, and you have to know that going in. So you can't trust them. Basically, you can't rely on them. You can only trust them to act in the best interests of the dark energy that's possessing them.
Yeah, and the whole conversation you have with them, trying to give them good advice, winds up being like it makes them feel like, oh, I'm working towards getting better, so I don't have to do anything now. Self-improvement, so I don't have to actually improve anything. I can improve tomorrow. What you're doing by...
Yeah, it's like when people say, I'm taking full responsibility for whatever I did, as if saying I'm taking full responsibility is taking full responsibility.
Precisely, yeah, like having the mea culpa, and feeling guilty, but then doing the exact same thing. And now, how do we apply this to ourselves? Yeah, like I was thinking about this. This is the bloody welfare state, isn't it? I mean, the welfare state...
Yeah, there's a lot of fucking government money and taxpayer collected money goes to addiction programs and stuff that doesn't do shit for the actual problem.
Well, and I'm also just thinking generally, the sort of people that are actually down on their luck and are working at getting their act together and straightening out their finances, those sort of people don't ask for help. You know, people that are actually, like, listen, if any of you, like, I often have, like, I read a lot, you know, and I try and write good stuff, and maybe you have a problem that you're trying to figure out. You just need the right heuristic, and you'll come read a blog post I wrote, or read something that somebody else wrote. You'll listen to some Jordan B. Peterson, whatever, and it will help crystallize a lot of this stuff for you so that you can go fix it. But you guys, you know, aren't bugging me with incessant questions about all this stuff, right? The people that have these incessant questions are usually the ones that don't want to fix the problem. They just want to talk about fixing the problem.
Yes. Yeah, anytime your decisions and your deliberation brings you back to the same conclusions over and over again, it's time to stop asking those questions and start acting on the solution. Basically.
Which actually goes to point number 5. We'll get to 3 eventually. Point number 5 is that the addicts will ignore simple advice. You know, like seriously, it is so bloody frustrating because the core of addiction is not actually the drug. All right, the drug, like if you have a problem drinking, you buy yourself a 6-pack on Friday night and no more. You know, and you just make that the rule. I'm drinking this much and no more. If you have to, you hide 3 beers in the back of the toilet where you can't find them. So there's a simple solution. Oh, I'm getting drunk all the time. We'll stop drinking.
Right. It's not an easy problem to solve, but it's a very simple one.
And rather than acknowledge the simple solutions, they are looking for a complex solution all the time. You know, I was writing, I forget who it is. He writes for City Journal. But I was reading about him, how the criminals would come to him in his practice in the prison and trying to ask him for, it's like, what's wrong with me? Well, it's like, what's wrong with you is that you keep breaking into churches and stealing stuff. That's what's wrong with you. But they're looking for some complex solution that will excuse them. And see, when it comes to our personal lives, when it comes to self-improvement, generally speaking, with rare exceptions, it's not the big decisions in our lives that make the big, like there's maybe 5 or 6 big decisions in our life. Like whether or not to marry this chick, that's a big decision. What you major in university, that's a fairly big decision. But see, those big decisions aren't the ones that really, really matter. It's the small decisions each day. Are you going to work out today? Because if you work out every single day, you will be in good shape. Are you going to work out every day? Are you going to do something productive today? Are you going to resist temptation? Are you not going to waste money? Etc. Like the way you improve your life is through small decisions that take a little bit of willpower, paradigm shifts.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it. Well, okay, you know how, and I've mentioned this before, we talk about the hamster, rationalization hamster, and usually it applies to women and their reasoning that allows them to do stuff that makes no sense. I've said this before, but the rationalization hamster of an addict is 10 times that of a fucking woman. If you think that women come up with funny excuses for why they do or don't do things, you should hear an addict's excuses, because they'll spin all kinds of narratives. They have to. You have to spin yourself a crazy narrative and a web of lies to get through your day-to-day life when you're in that position. It's the only way to not shoot yourself in the head. So these people are highly adjusted to a lifestyle of spinning any kind of a narrative and bullshit rationalization to do what they need to do. So that compounds the problem of physical addiction and withdrawal and all that stuff. It's a more complex issue than, the solution again is simple. You have to stop the intake of whatever substance is killing you. But there's so much mental white noise keeping you from reaching that decision. That's the problem these people have.
It's sort of like Occam's razor, where generally speaking, the simplest solution is probably the answer. Like if your car's being shitty, it's probably only 1 or 2 parts in your car that need to be replaced. It's not the entire damn car. It's probably something rather simple. And the same thing with your own life. There's usually something rather simple that you need to address. And they burn up all their energy creating these really constructs that are nothing but rationalizations at the end of the day. And this goes on to, okay, point 6. They repeat the same behavior patterns. They're like clockwork. They keep doing the same thing over and over again. And now the thing is, we're all like that in a way. Like we all have these circadian rhythms running through us, right? And if what you want to do is start looking at your own patterns, examining your own patterns, and figuring out where it is, like under what conditions you start stepping on your own dick and screwing yourself up. You have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, not really beyond what you said, though. It's pretty predictable. The pattern usually follows, it exists in any addict's behavior, because once I don't know if you've seen the movie Trainspotting. Have you ever seen that movie?
Oh, yeah.
It's great. Well, he says, the Ian McGregor character says, when you're on junk, you got only one priority, and that's scoring. When you're off it, all of a sudden you have all these other things you got to worry about: paying bills, paying rent, eating food, yada, yada. So when you only have one objective to meet and it's the most important thing, yeah, you're going to stick to it, and the cycle is going to continue until you make some serious adjustments.
Life is a hell of a lot simpler if all you have is scoring more blow or weed or whatever. Whereas when you're sober, you know, it all comes crashing back, and you're like, oh, I hate myself. I've screwed everything up. Goes and does more of whatever substance it is to distract themselves from everything that's all screwed up.
Exactly.
And so this kind of goes into point 7. They are purely driven by base instinct. And you pointed this out to me before we started the show.
Yeah, that's what I came up with off the top of my head. Because in the case of most drugs, I mean, including alcohol to some degree, alcohol is actually one of the more dangerous things to come off of cold turkey. It affects the more primordial reptilian, like base parts of your brain most of the time, which are the parts of your brain affiliated with survival and all the most basic functions you don't even think about. So when that chemistry gets reorganized, it just causes all kinds of crazy shit, because you're basically number one priority for survival is to continue to perpetuate the cycle of addiction, and it feels like you need it to live. So it can definitely manipulate your behavior in that way.
Well, and when you get right down to it, the like when you boil a person down, when you soak their brain in lye for a while, where there's nothing lizard brain left, what you get is a rat. These addicts are like, they're sneaky little rats at their core. And speaking of, let's finally get to point 3, emotiveness. Addicts are the most emotionally intemperate people out there. Whatever they're feeling, they're wearing it on their sleeves. They're crying, they're yelling, they're whatever. They're like goddamned infants.
Yeah, it's pretty pathetic, actually. Because the whole nature of this sort of a person is reactive in and of itself. You can't act upon something or act upon the universe or impose your will when your will is being controlled and manipulated by an outside force, such as an addiction to a substance. So as a result, your entire existence is an emotional state. You basically become a woman if you're an addict.
Yeah,
you can only react. You can't force your will onto anything. You can only react to what is around you, and that's when your world becomes smaller and smaller by the day, and these people become more and more petty and pathetic, and the cycle just continues, and until your world consists of nothing but you and an addiction. That's pretty dark.
And this leads to the final point, is that they are absolutely spendthrift. They blow money left, right, and center. They have absolutely no sense of fiscal responsibility. And I'm not just talking on the drugs, okay? They spend money on whatever, whenever they feel like it. Like in the case of this SOB, he bought a damn bird feeder when he was behind on his bills. A damned bird feeder. Why would you buy a bird feeder? Who the hell gives a shit about the damn birds if you can't pay your bills on time?
I'll tell you why, because I don't know what this guy was using, but generally addicts will get all kinds of interests in hobbies when intoxicated or when high, and that they abandon shortly after, either because of a loss of interest or whatever. But yeah, that happens. Oh, wouldn't it be great to collect whatever it is? Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. It's weird, but it's typical behavior.
You know what? You're absolutely bang on. Yeah, there's point 9, that they start projects and never finish them. They pick up hobbies and never go anywhere with them.
Because the hobby and the interest becomes a catalyst for just another generation of an emotional state, which is what they're addicted to, really. So it just, everything about their mind is gonna generate that kind of an experience.
I think a lot of it has to do with our search for happiness. Now, happiness is an interesting term. It comes from the, I believe, Germanic word hap, which means luck. It's also the root word for happenstance. So is when something good happens to you for no reason, like you don't deserve it. Okay, it's just you're walking down the street and you find 20 bucks. That's happiness. It has nothing to do with the virtue you've shown in life or your choices. It's just something good came and landed on your lap. And when you consider drugs, they, like whichever drug it is, what they do is they make you feel happy for no damned reason. You know, like if I'm drinking a bottle of whiskey, you know, I'm just sitting by myself feeling pretty good about everything right now because here I am sitting in the dark drinking my whiskey. You know?
Yep. Yeah. But you pay like in more than the cost of whatever you bought and in the end, you know?
Exactly. Because
Basically what I'm saying is like there is a equal and opposite reaction for every action you take. This is like an example in spades because to the to the average normie or newbie or whatever, he's going to buy drugs and think, "Oh, I felt great and all I had to do was spend $20." Well, keep it up and you'll find the real monster that's laying in wait for you there. There is no such thing as a free lunch, and drugs are a perfect example.
Precisely. And the thing is, because happiness is unearned, it's unpredictable. I mean, you could say it's predictable that every time you buy whiskey, you know, or weed or whatever, it's predictable that you feel happy. Except actually it isn't. If you've been doing drugs a long time, or just like just a regular drinker, you know, you'll understand this. That, yeah, it feels great at first, but then there's no guarantee. And then if you fall too deeply into that endless pursuit of happiness, then eventually the misery catches up with you and smacks you on the other side. Which isn't to say that you need to be an absolute teetotaler, but that you need to be conscious of the fact that, yeah, you get drunk, you'll have a hangover the next day. That's what you're signing up for. You know, a little bit of cheat, like it's like, man, I've had a long week, I'm really stressed out, you know, I'm going to have a little bit of booze to take it off, and I'm going to have a hangover tomorrow. And I know exactly what I'm doing. Whereas,
yeah, see, alcohol I think is more. I mean, it can be destructive too, but it's more what you see is what you get.
it's a fairly
In terms of, yeah, you pay the price relatively quickly as opposed to something like opiates where you can kind of use them recreationally for a bit, for a while before you really start to feel the negative effects. And by then it's too late. By then you've already probably gotten yourself in a bad situation. So there are, depending on what
you've collected a bunch of STDs in the process. With marijuana, you wind up pissing away 10 years of your life on that damn drug. You know, and then you wake up and like, what the hell happened to my life? I used to have, you know, potential. Now I'm a burnout.
yeah, weed is that's the most destructive part of it. I think is the destruction of motivation and time that you won't even realize until you've been smoking weed for like a couple years already, and you're like, wait, what happened, bro? Like, yeah, that happens. People say it's totally harmless, but that's the harm right there.
And you know what? And this is related to what you were saying about the hobbies, that they just pick them up and then drop them. Is that, again, they're looking for happiness, they're not looking for joy. Is a choice. It's something you do willfully. Uh, Writing a book or painting a painting or whatever. You know, like actually I am making the conscious decision that I'm going to start this hobby and I'm going to excel at this hobby, you know, as a long-term thing. And I'm going to put work into this hobby. And I'm not going to be feeling happy when I'm working on it. I'm going to be feeling very, very frustrated when I'm working on it. And I'm going to feel joy over this. As a society, I think we've tended to prioritize happiness, which is nothing but like, look at the damn word serendipity. Okay? Middle-aged women love that damn word. Serendipity.
It's the dumbest fucking word ever.
It's when you dumb luck your way into something good. You know,
it just sounds gay. It just sounds gay. Serendipity.
Well, it is gay. It's saying, oh, the universe will make me happy. No, the universe is an indifferent cold machine. That sometimes it drops 20 bucks in front of you. Other times a bird takes a shit on your head.
Well, I think this is a thing, a reason why, like, women just think it just happened. Things just happen, because in their world, it does just fucking happen. Because guess what? There's a guy out there willing to make it happen, whether it's meet her or whatever the fuck. But if you ask her, it just happened.
You know, Ann Sturzinger recently had a very good observation that the Gen X feminists who were ever actually equal to men. See, the feminists before Gen X were like, oh, we want equal opportunity in the workplace. We're sick of having to stay home and raise kids. And guys said, okay, honey. And so women entered the workplace and they found out it sucked. They got to the workplace and like, wait, this is what being a man was? I thought it was fun. I didn't know it was shitty. And, you know, so that wave of feminists, Camille Paglia, I'd say she's one of those. Well, the third wavers came up afterwards, and because being a man sucks, they went back to blaming men for all of their damn problems. Yeah, I'm thinking about doing up a little graphic that what a feminist says, what she actually means. You know, when she screams about rape culture, what she's saying is that men need to control her from making bad sexual decisions. When she
I mean, at the end of the day, that's the fucking truth, man. Like, we let... This is what's so frustrating, is that if tomorrow every man decided that feminism was going to be over, it would be over. It'd be that simple. If men just made the decision that we were going to take away their right to vote, etc., we'd be in the clear. But it's never going to happen.
Well, and this is why I think talk about the addict. It's not. I'm not just saying this because I should honestly, man. I'm done helping people at this point, because the people that ask for help don't actually need it. Okay, the people that need help aren't going to ask for it. The people asking don't need the help and aren't going to do anything with it. So I'm just building I'm going to build a wall, and Mexico's going to pay for it. Okay, you know, only people that are vetted get to come inside the fortification. But on a broader sense, I was talking about happiness, and the addict is always pursuing happiness. What is it that all the chump husbands love to say? Happy life.
Oh yeah, Jesus, I hate that.
Listen, what a stupid statement as well. It is woman's.
You have to be a ballless faggot to actually say something like that.
Like what do women evolve? What do they evolve to do? They evolve to complain all the time. Okay, it's deeply embedded in their genetic code to complain about everything. All right, and to expect men to fix it for them. So guess what?
Bang on.
Do it a happy wife. A happy wife is after she complained, you bent her over, smacked her butt, and impregnated her. That's a happy wife. Finding a better school district or again, happiness does not exist. Okay, joy exists. All right, if you're going to be a husband to your wife, you are going to be building a life with her. And you do want a woman that is self-aware. You don't want a Big Red or an Anita Sarkeesian out there that says that men are absolutely responsible for everything, but women are more powerful. Yeah, no, sweetie, you're saying that men are more powerful and they need to fix all your problems. But yeah, you actually do want a woman that is...
Because it always involves that. It's never them fixing their own problems. It's always about why you need to fix problems or pay money or whatever.
And so we've got some of
They've never been interested in...
The least self-aware women who have ever existed on the face of the planet are the face of feminism. But yeah, what this
Correct.
Of feminism comes down to guys seeking after being happy all the time. You know, whether it's affirming feminist preconceptions so you can get your dick wet, or affirming feminist conceptions because happy wife, happy life. It's seeking the easy route through things. It's not taking ownership. It's not making decisions. This is the thing with the addict. Ultimately, the damned addict won't take any ownership of himself. Everything is the environment's fault. It's everybody else's fault. It's the drug's fault. Whatever. They won't stop and say, no, I want to live this kind of life. And doing this won't help it.
Well, that's at the point when they cease to be addicts, is when they actually make that decision.
And this is why I think the paradigm that we're describing here is a lot broader than just the idiots that you see that are really, really destructive. Those are the obvious cases. But for every one of those, there's 99 out there that manage to pay their bills on time, and maybe they're even married, but they're just absolutely miserable, envious pieces of human trash. You know, like that's the one true thing Anita Sarkeesian ever said, and nobody believed it. I'm sorry, Sargon is human trash, or Thunderfoot, or whoever the hell she was talking about. But
you got to give her some credit. She knew exactly when to get out of the game and cash in her chips.
Yeah, and actually,
you got to give her some credit for that.
You know what? She might even be somewhat aware, just, lawful evil, basically.
Well, she knew. She probably, okay, because she basically came around at the peak feminism era when the whole like video games and tech industry was being fucking, undermined by all that shit. Took advantage of that, got her money. Once she sniffed that the winds were starting to blow the other way, she fucking abandoned ship.
Yep, she took her money and she GTFO'd.
So she's smarter than I guess people would give her credit for. I mean, she's not still sticking around flying that banner after its time has already passed, even if some people don't realize that yet.
Well, and she got rid of Macintosh because he was a true believer. I mean, Macintosh is also a total psycho, but more to the point, he's a true believer, and that's the problem. You don't get anywhere in this political world by being a true believer. You need to be a scam artist. Come in, grab.
Well, yeah, it's more expedient. It's more expedient if you don't actually care about anything. That's what I fucking hate about, all this crap is that people sell ideas while not believing in them. People that buy it do, but everyone who's ever like pushed anything like that is completely full of shit. It's not even coming from a genuine place.
Well, I think that's something people need to be careful of. What are you buying when you buy it? You need to be aware of what you're buying. And with all of this, all the recent nonsense that's been going on, a lot of people are they are buying their way into a false group, into a false sense of identity. It's like, I'm backing this person on Patreon, so I'm part of this cool kids club. And by the way, back me on Patreon, folks. And it's a fun line.
You should have a Patreon live stream called "The Evils of Patreon."
Yeah, like the guys, get off the internet and watch my YouTube videos. Yeah, it's honestly, this is something I've been thinking a lot about recently. Is the medium, is the message? And what is the message of the internet? What does the internet all boil down to? And what can it be? All right, because I really like, there's this guy called Rob Aker. You should all check him out on YouTube. And he has this brilliant analysis of 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the movie Kubrick was making was not about aliens or space travel or anything like that. The monolith in 2001 is a movie screen. And it's saying the movie screen fundamentally changed our understanding of ourselves. What are we going to do with that? So you start off with the monkeys, and the monolith appears, and suddenly the monkeys can look at themselves. They can see their own intellect thinking. They become self-aware, and boom, they pick up the bone and go and murder the cheetah. And now, over the past century, we've developed this new medium of communication, the television screen. What is this doing to us? And, what is the internet doing to us? And it's kind of worrisome.
I've come around to the idea that I don't think it's the internet that's causing behaviors so much as that's the behavior on the internet is a result of something else. It's not I guess I haven't really fully figured out how to phrase this, but I think we're just seeing more of human nature actually just play out itself more clearly because of the internet. I don't think the internet's altered any sort of fundamental part about us
Well, what I
as it
learned
is.
is the currency of the internet, it seems to me, is sarcasm and disdain. Those are the
Yeah,
elements that
snarkiness. Snarkiness is up there.
yeah, you don't get to have paladins anymore if snarkiness is the currency of the civilization. Snarkiness and drug addiction. And it's hard to say how much of that is the internet itself, how much of that is just like there's a lot of elements going into it. Another thing,
Yeah, there's some smart ass in the comments who's saying, "My internet, it just amplifies, not a root cause of anything." Of course, he doesn't offer like a counterpoint and say it. I'd like to hear it, but I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm sure it has some kind of an effect, but I think most of what we're seeing with the attention whoring and all that shit is just human nature. Period.
another element worth considering is that I was talking with Forney about this. We were having a long conversation about the like this current whatever going on in the alt right. I mean, it's going to pass. Okay, it's just a weather storm. I just, I'm holding up in the basement in case a tornado drops. Um, but what's going on there? And I think a lot of it has to do with the nature of right wing politics. Period. Uh, Oftentimes we call right wing politics depression porn because you go onto a right wing channel, and it's Alex Jones is yelling about the frogs turning gay, and Rooch V is warning you about the rate of divorce, on and on, and the economy is going to collapse, and the birds aren't migrating right anymore, and the bees are all dying, and there's this wave of invading. It's all depression porn. And I think that a lot of us on the right, we come to the right because we reject platitudes. The everybody's special, serendipity, all of that faggoty crap. We hate that stuff. And so we migrate to the political right. But the political right winds up being, because it's so focused on the negative, winds up having these death cult elements to it. And it winds up summoning the same negative energy that it is putting out there.
Yeah, you certainly make some good points. It's a shame, though. I mean, I wish we had a little bit more optimism, but I can't blame people for feeling somewhat negative about the prognosis.
Well, I think I think it's the difference between happiness and joy. We need to be living purposeful lives, which I know that's very easily sliding into that hippie language we all hate, but it's true. We need to actually be living for something as individuals, rather than jumping onto these political bandwagons for the sake of identity. As soon as you get a mass movement it's nothing but a bunch of people that are trying to find a source of identity and a source of happiness in their lives, as soon as that happens, the whole damn movement to fail. You should become a jazz musician because you really like the music and you like experimenting with different sounds and so on. You shouldn't become a jazz musician because you like the outfits.
Well, again, that's just more of human nature using bleeding into the internet and not the other way around, as far as I see it. But yeah, you're right. It's people will latch on to things because they don't have a fucking purpose in their lives. They've always done that. They always will do that. Period.
Well, and the sad thing is that our purposes are just so divided. Our identities are so divided from our purposes. There isn't this holistic overall being that you can have anymore. You know, there's the sense of community where your community gave you social status and your community gave you wealth and it presented you with women you could marry. It was all of these things.
In other words, you were motivated to participate in it and act in its best interest, as opposed to it working against you, which is kind of where we find ourselves now, where you literally have no incentive to work for the system.
Well, and everything's so compartmentalized. Like your job is, if you have any brains, you are going to compartmentalize your job from your social life. You don't want to hang out with your coworkers because your coworkers will start gossiping and you'll get a harassment complaint of some sort from one of these idiots eventually.
Right, which is why nobody who's like, you know, cool or has any kind of social skills fucking likes to hang out with their coworkers, because they realize that's got more negatives to positives.
Yeah. And your friend circle is going to be isolated from it. Yeah, so you get these movements where they're only getting a sense of identity from them. They're not making any money doing this. They're not making even like volunteering with a political party. You know, doing that. Yeah, you are volunteering your time, but you're also making friends and making business connections and so on and so forth. There's actually something productive when you're engaging in something like that. And I'm not saying that these online movements completely lack all of that stuff, but it's largely lacking from them. Most of it is just anonymous commentating, you know. And what are you doing? You're sending,
or it's a social club.
it's a social club, and social clubs don't exist for any damn reason whatsoever. You know, so you have an anonymous Twitter account, and you're sending a triggering meme to another anonymous Twitter account. You're making
right. It's really stupid when you actually get down to it. I mean, the fact that anyone takes any of this shit seriously is kind of funny if you really think about it.
And by the way, any folks out there, you want to join in, just message me on Skype, aurinidmj@gmail.com.
Or if anyone in the chat wants to jump in.
Yeah, we'll bring you in. So I don't know, it's a weird time right now. Like there's a lot of adjustment going on and things. I was reading the Z-Man blog. He was pointing out that the people that wound up being the initial leaders of the alt-right, many of them just got there through happenstance, luck, having nothing to do with their actual worthiness. And that sounds a lot more brutal when I put it that way. But you know what it boils down to is that
I'd say it's more timing than luck. I mean, I think that's usually how things spring up, is organically anyways. So to say that they were there at the right place at the right time is true, but it wouldn't have been, I mean, I'm not speaking in terms of the alt-right, but just in general, when these things pop up, it's usually organically. So yeah, the people that were there when these things start are there for a reason. They happen to have the right thing to say or do at the right time, to where there was the winds at their back, etc.
well, and the other thing you notice is that there's no selection criteria to make sure that we get electable candidates. Like the two parties, they have these very well-oiled machines in place to make sure that people get elected who, you know, can put their pants on in the morning and can, you know, not, etc. Now, obviously, that became way too stifling, and we needed somebody like Donald Trump to come shake things up. But at the same time, you want somebody that can control their bowels before they start stepping into any sort of leadership position. And yeah, so the first round of the alt-right, there were inevitably a lot of people there that could not maintain a serious public face or could not whatever might be necessary.
Right. It like most things has to be sanded around the edges and stuff in order to move on to the next level. That's why I don't understand all this shock and horror about these like schisms that happen in these communities, or any burgeoning sort of, you know, thing that's popular, whether it's a movement or a music genre. There's always going to be some sanding around the edges and like refinements and shedding of whatever's to move on. And people always act like it's such a travesty. It's just the way things work.
Speaking of Sandmans, we got Steel on. What are you saying, brother?
Hey, how's it going? Well, I saw your tweet and I wasn't sure what the show was gonna be about. You just had me thinking about people I've known that were addicts, quote unquote. And I was thinking about addicts in the sense of drug addicts and they're alcoholics. And the one I was trying to think, is there a common theme among the ones that I've known? And I had to do it from memory because I actually don't have any addicts in my life now, but at least not substance type addicts anyway. And one thing you didn't listen there was they were all impulsive. There was an impulsiveness. They never thought things through.
Yeah,
that's true.
Instinct there, where it's just like they get this reptilian instinct to go do something, but they don't apply any rational thought or discipline to it at all.
Yeah, well, even like when I'm not even talking about the impulsiveness to do the drug or whatever. I mean, they were just impulsive by nature. They just never seemed to think out their consequences. Like there was a guy I grew up with. He died about 5 years ago. He killed himself. And he was an addict growing up, and he eventually became a heroin addict, but I had lost touch with him by the time he got into that. But he was like, he started out with, booze and then pot. And then, eventually this guy would suck vanilla extract to get high, I guess, at one point. But I mean, when I knew him, even when we were kids, before he got into like really doing hard drugs, he was always very impulsive. Like he never thought through consequences. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if that's true.
That reflects my experience too. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's just I was just trying to think of that because I mean, like I said, I don't have someone like you had a recent guy that you were dealing with, David. So it's kind of fresh in your mind, but I don't have any. I mean, pretty much everybody I knew that had a problem with drinking or drugging, they either quit or died. So I don't have any of those people around me anymore.
Yeah, I've unfortunately had a stream of negative personalities.
Well, a lot of the things that you were listing in the list that you had there in the low bar or whatever, I don't know if that was a good list of. That was just kind of a list of just someone who's just fucked up, not necessarily an addict. I don't know how other people listening feel about that, but those traits didn't necessarily apply to addicts so much as a lot of them were signs of just basic immaturity and narcissism.
Yeah, and you know what? I think you're right. Like, it really is more about the like. I wasn't trying to come up with the DSM-6's definition of addiction, but I think you're right. It is more this infantilism, this immaturity, this acting like a damn 12-year-old. Taking no responsibility, taking no direction, wanting to just play with toys all the time, essentially.
Yeah, and I think that affects like I don't know if that I mean, I'd have to really think about this, but I don't know if that really ties in with addicts, at least addicts in the substance sense. I'm not talking about people who are addicted to more abstract things. I'm thinking about more chemical type addiction.
Well, see, honestly, the chemical addiction is never the problem. I'm mildly chemically dependent on booze, and I'm thinking I might just quit drinking for this month. At least mostly quit drinking. If I start, feeling itchy, because I'm chemically addicted to it, then yeah, I'll go buy a tall boy and take the edge off. But I just want to, like, after dealing with this BS, I just want to make 100% clear that I use alcohol to enhance my life. I don't use alcohol for the sake of using alcohol. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. But I think like with alcohol specifically, I don't know if this is true with like opioids and stuff like that. I think that but the alcohol specifically, I think there was a strong genetic factor with addiction to that. Because like you look at just how, you look at, let's say, people of Mediterranean descent, like, Greeks and Italians, like they almost never become alcoholics. And you look at, let's say, Native Americans, and 99 out of 100 of them, if they drink their, that fire water,
Well, listen, with booze, there's a certain thing that happens when you drink too much that at one point, like, because it's a stimulant and a depressant, you wind up completely depressing your thinking ability while stimulating the hell out of your I want to do something. And at that point, you just want to keep drinking more and more booze, getting more out of control the entire damn time. Now, so for us Europeans, we have enough alcohol in our history that the point where we go crazy is about, it takes about a liter and a half of whiskey to get me that drunk. But for the Native American, or for, and I've met guys like this, they actually hit that stage after one beer because it affects them so profoundly. So for that person, they really can't drink at all because they instantly go crazy drunk. But again, that's not a chemical addiction. That's just how it affects you. And if that's the case, you need to not drink.
I think
yeah,
that point,
yeah,
like the point of it affects everyone differently, that applies to everything. And that's one of the reasons why addiction is such a hard thing to deal with, both as the addict and as the people, who are supposed to treat it or whatever, or the people around you, is because it's every human being's experience with every problem they encounter is unique to some degree. There are common threads, but it just makes it that much more of a minefield to navigate for an addict. You got to take into account their idiosyncrasies and little things about them that'll make it a different experience for them. Some people get lost in it and die, and others get over it. It's just makes it that much harder to navigate that kind of a problem.
Well, so part of the issue is that whatever drug it is, the drug inevitably changes your cognition and puts you in a state where you can't cogitate properly. So when you're actually on the drug, you are going to be irrational to some degree. But with all of these addicts, they are eventually sober. Okay, and the problem is that when they're sober and they just screwed a whole bunch of stuff up, that's when they choose to go back to the drug. And it's a form of, it's a form of self-destruction. It's the Thanatos urge, the wanting to destroy yourself, to commit slow suicide.
Well, it's interesting. I had a close friend that was a social worker. He had a MSW, Masters of Social Work, and he worked with basically the dregs of society. That was just this guy's kind of calling, and he said, like, one of the challenges dealing with like the homeless community is that invariably there was they'd have some sort of addiction of some kind, but also he said the reason it was so hard to treat these people was they also would have some form of, usually some type of mental illness, whether it was depression, some type of schizophrenia, something like that. And then thirdly, they had usually 9 times out of 10, they had no sort of support system, like as far as, stable family connections or healthy family connections or anything like that. So dealing with those people, it was nearly impossible.
And you know what? There but for the grace of God, every single one of us here, if we had made different decisions, if some things had turned out differently, we could have wound up like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, just you know, just like you know, family situations, things like that. You know, I mean, you know, who knows? Like maybe you know some of these people. Uh, let's say if you have, let's say, a mild case of schizophrenia or depression, and then you have no family support structure, and then you turn to, you know, substance, whatever it be, booze or drugs or whatever, and then before you know it, you're on the street, and then at that point, it becomes so hard to get back because you don't have any, you know, you need a hand up, you know.
Well, they need a hand up, but how many are them? How many of them are willing to take that hand? I mean, yeah,
Well, the point is that they're not in a sane state to really make that decision, because what happens, and I'm just speaking to what, you know, what was explained to me, because I was close friends with this guy. I mean, I knew him for years. You know, I knew him since the mid '90s. We both, I met him through like the same dojo, and the problem is they really can't make decisions for themselves, because they have all these multiple things affecting their perceptions of reality.
That's what I was saying earlier, that you have to, when you're, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to interject that you have to understand when dealing with them that you're dealing with a dark energy and not the person independent of, you know, able to make decisions for themselves. So you have to know that going in. It's a given.
Yeah, it's not, you can't talk to them like logically and explain. I mean, the first thing you have to do is detox them to some degree. Then then you have to assess them, like, you know, what other contributing factors is it? Like, is there some organic uh, problem with their brain that they were born with, or that was caused by living on the street and doing drugs? Then what sort of, you know, do they have any basic life skills? If after living on the street for so long, do they even know how to buy a tube of toothpaste in the store? So it's really a difficult problem, you know.
well, the biggest problem I think is that very few of them have even a conception of what getting better would be. You know, they still want to pursue empty happiness without pursuing virtue. They want empty happiness without the consequences that pursuing happiness inevitably gets you. You know, if you're just pursuing this stimulation all the time, you know, whether it's drugs or whether you're just being stimulated by the latest video game and garbage pop culture, and you know, you have a job that stresses you out where you make 120 grand, so you buy a new car every 2 years and a new house every 5 years. Uh, you're not living. You're still wrapped up in this really toxic system, and if you're not willing
Well,
to get out,
that's a little existential, though. I mean, because basically you can have, if you're just, you know, if you're making a shitload of money, you know, what the fuck are you going to do with it? Of course, you're going to buy a nicer house. What, you know, otherwise, why would you have the job? You know, I mean, why not get a nicer house, get a finer wife? You know, I mean, um,
well, no,
or you know,
I know people that commute an hour back and forth to Calgary for work so that they can have a whole bunch of 4x4s that they can never ride because they're commuting all the damn time. That's insane.
well, it might, like, to you, it might be insane, or to me, it might be insane, but you know, to them, maybe the this limited amount of time they get to ride those things, it makes sense to them. You know, I mean, I also know people who have to do long commutes where I live for work, and sometimes it's out of necessity, but they probably could get a job closer by and make less money. But you know, I don't know. I think people have different, you know, wants and desires. You know, some people are very happy living a minimalist lifestyle. I mean, I'm pretty happy doing that for the most part, because I kind of had my hedonistic phase in my 20s. I owned a lot of stuff, and you know, I used to own a boat and all that kind of stuff, and you know, now I'm, you know, a minimalist.
Well, listen, I haven't stared into these people's souls, so I can't tell you what's actually going on. But I will say that if your hobby is going to the mall to buy something that you only ever use once, you know, you're seeking this endless stimulation. You're not actually seeking true, you're not living life. You're just consuming all the time. It's a distraction. Like, you need to want to live. This is the thing with the addicts. They don't want to live. All right.
Yeah,
Sean,
I guess with like addiction, I guess there's like degrees of it. Like there's someone that, you know, drinks too much, and then because like I'm sure I have friends that, you know, drink too much. I just don't, you know, I'm not around them all the time, so I don't, you know. But they're functioning so well that they appear fine. You know, because they're you know they always go to work. They pay all their bills. They're, you know. You know, I never, you know, they don't end up in jail calling me up to bail them out. You know, there's none of that nonsense. So I assume they're okay. So I think you know, something like addiction, if you want to use the disease model, I don't know if you believe that or not. I honestly don't know enough about it to make an educated uh, uh, guess. But if it is a disease, I guess there'd be degrees of how sick you are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier about the degrees, and when we were comparing it to the gamma thing, because I think there's kind of degrees of the gamma-tude and all that bullshit too. But yeah, it's if it's a disease, it's the only disease where the patient chooses to have it or chooses to act on it. So that gives me a bit of pause on that.
the same thing with all of these. Like all mental illnesses, it boils down to free will. Now, I'm not saying that you just decide to snap out of it and you're not depressed anymore. You know, the same way that if you are deep into some sort of drug addiction, it's going to be hard to dig yourself out of that pit. But if you're going to, you need to want to. And the thing with addicts is they don't want to get out. Depression doesn't just pop out of nowhere. Okay, there's going to be a lot of stuff leading up to it. And
Well, like my friend who died, he killed himself. He was a heroin addict. He ended up jumping. A really tragic story. He ended up taking a leap out of a fifth floor window in his mother's apartment that he grew up in on Super Bowl Sunday. And he had been on and off heroin several times. He had been battling this. You know, he had periods of sobriety, and he would go back to it. I mean, he wanted to be clean. He had OD'd a few times and lived. And I remember him saying to another mutual friend that he wished that they didn't bring him back. You know, that's how lost he was in it. So without the drug, he was so he never articulated this to me because, like I said, I only knew him when he was doing other drugs before he got into heroin. But apparently, he lost the ability to feel any pleasure in life without the drug. Even having, I think at one point he almost made 2 years sober, and he still could never. You know, it still came back. You know. I don't want to bum. I'm sorry, bumming people
No,
out.
I was just going to comment on that. I believe it. I do. I mean, that sounds like a fairly typical story to me. And the whole thing with never want or not being able to see any light at the end of the tunnel or be happy again is a temporary thing. Opiates are very powerful and they rewire your brain in such a way. Like I said earlier, the fundamental parts of your brain that are basically your brain is reprogrammed to think it's a necessity for survival. So it makes the withdrawal that much more intense, basically, which is already a physical hell in and of itself. But there's a whole psychological component to it that takes many long months to recover from, and it's pretty profound, just the kind of deep impact that opiates specifically have. So I'm not surprised to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a tragic story because he was kind of a well-liked person because everybody knew him in the neighborhood I grew up in because he came from this really large family, and he anyway. I won't get into that story too much. But I mean, speaking about opiates, about two years ago, a little bit less than 2 years ago, I broke both of my legs and I was like in a hospital for 4 days, and I was on what do you call it, Percocet. And I actually stopped taking it as soon as I left the hospital. I was just in a wheelchair and stuff, even though I was still in pain, because I knew how. One, I didn't really like the drug. I mean, not that I disliked it, but it didn't make me I didn't see what the huge attraction was, other than it did take away the pain. It was excellent at that. But other than that, I didn't see the point of taking it recreationally, because it just made me sleepy. But I also stopped taking it because, even though I was in pain, and I just switched to, you know, over the counter stuff, was because I had heard so many horror stories about how quickly people get addicted to it and how quickly it can rewire your brain. And I know how quick doctors are to prescribe that shit, you know. So I just didn't, you know, I didn't refill the script after I left the hospital.
Well, I think part of it is that we need to learn to accept suffering in our lives. I mean, suffering has always been that this inevitability and this existentially challenging question. I mean, it's one of the first things atheists bring up, you know, a question of evil. How can there be a good God if evil exists in the universe? And we don't have a culture anymore that encourages people to accept suffering. You know, it's like your marriage is going through a rough patch. Oh, let's bail on the marriage. Let's start all over again. You know, it's like, oh, well, this is hard. Again, it's like the addict with their hobby. It's fun for the first 20 minutes, and then it's boring, and they move on to something else, and they never actually accomplish anything.
Well,
Actually,
there's degrees of like suffering. Like I remember I was reading about vets who like amputees, not just vets, but there's a huge number of vets with amputees. You know, if you get part of your legs blown off by an IED and stuff, and just because of the nature of the amputation and then exposed nerve endings and stuff like that, they're in constant pain. And they prescribe these poor guys, you know, OxyContin, and it makes them addicts. But the question is that if they don't give it to them, they'll be in constant pain. So it basically just comes down to a quality of life issue. Do they want to spend their life high, or do they want to spend it in constant pain?
well, I'd wager that the vets do a lot better than most people out there, because to even become a veteran in the first place, you have to go through basic training. And if you can't withstand a bit of suffering, you're not going to make it through basic training.
Well, correct. But there's a difference between, you know, making it through basic training and then comparing that to going through life with, you know, both of your legs amputated, you know, above the knee. So,
you know, I would say give them as many opioids as they want. You know, that'd be my stance. You know, and I think if you're injured in a war, you should get a decent pension. I think you've done, like, I mean, we're blowing all this damn money, you know, in our societies and stuff we don't need. I think we can provide a bloody pension. I think you've earned it. Get a pension and take as many opioids as you want, and you decide whether there are too many opioids or not. I think, like, when we're discussing the whole pain issue, this is a completely different thing.
Well, unfortunately, that's how so many people become addicts on you know, that's how the heroin thing started. Was the heroin epidemic started because these people were getting addicted to, you know, Vicodin and Percocet because they were taking it for, you know, pain management. They hurt their back or, you know, something like that, and then they get cut off. And to score Percocet on the street, I don't know what it goes for, but like each pill is like really expensive, as opposed to heroin, which apparently is really cheap nowadays because I guess there's so much of it for some reason. I don't know why, but and that's, you know, so people just score heroin because they switch to heroin because it's basically works on the brain the same way as you know, the OxyContin does.
Yeah, it's just more potent. And the reason why there's so much of it is because of the early 2000s boom of OxyContin and other opiate not over the counter, but prescription drugs that were at the time legal. They suddenly cracked down on the laws about 10 years ago, and since then it's led to the rise of heroin because it's a cheaper alternative.
Listen, I'm pointing, you know, like this rise of opioids, it's really just exploiting an exploit that was there waiting to be exploited, a flaw, which is that we think we're supposed to be happy. We weren't designed to be happy, you know? That's not what we're here for. We're here to feel joy, but joy comes through suffering, through hard work. And just civilization, we've forgotten that. We think that there shouldn't be any suffering in the world. We think that life should just be peaches and cream the whole damn time. And that we should just be able to be plugged into the system and, bounce through high school, then bounce through college, then bounce through the corporation, and that everything should just turn out perfectly fine.
Having that idea of what to expect, that's just not going to work. Because that's not how it is.
Exactly. We need to take ownership of listen, over on A Voice for Men. Yeah, I stopped reading that years ago because it was just so damn negative. And I feel really bad for all these guys that got divorce raped. But at some point, you have to say, why did you marry that woman? Why did you not maintain the marriage? What were you doing? It's like, yes, I'm sure she did lots of stuff that was wrong, but all you can do is control your own behavior. You need to take responsibility for your own choices in life. And nobody wants to do that. They're like, well, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm a good person. No, you're not. You're a lazy son of a bitch. And you're addicted to Percocet.
Well, and I wanted to just emphasize that point you were making on accepting suffering in life. I think it's more important than people realize. It's something I picked up from, Jordan Peterson, or more or less it just solidified something that I was trying to put together better. And John Steele said something earlier about not seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. There's one thing I've learned in life. It's when you don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, just keep walking, because just because you don't see it doesn't mean you won't find one in 5 minutes. Don't give up, right?
Oh,
that's the best attitude. That's the best possible outlook you could have.
Well, and what's that Churchill quote? If you're going through hell, keep going.
Yes, I love that one.
Absolutely.
The Stephen King film The Mist had that as a bit of a moral to the end of it. A good movie. I just saw it the other day.
Interestingly enough, Stephen King is a recovering alcoholic.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how terrible experiences might help you later on. It's like, you can go through alcoholism and suffer through all of that, but it might help your writing career, and you might end up being Stephen King.
Well, that's what the Tommy Knockers was all about. I thought the TV series sucked, but I got what it was trying to say.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, I guess I was just kind of chiming in because, for two reasons. One, I was surprised that impulsivity wasn't on the list, because that was the seemed to be a common factor of the addicts that I've known. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And the other thing was that how addiction there's a lot of parts to it for some people. I mean, for some people, it's very simple. Like, I mean, they just, got into a habit of just drinking too much, and then it just became an integral part of their life. And then they, their life fell apart because of it. That's kind of a straightforward example, but other people, it's not that simple. It's a lot of people drink and do drugs because they have other underlying organic problems. Like they might suffer from some sort of clinical depression. The brain isn't working well, or they might have some schizophrenia, or all sorts of things.
Yeah, the public health question is, that's like, there's so many angles to that damn thing. For one thing, the entire public health system is it's based upon bad heuristics and incorrect ideologies. There's a lot of money and self-interest wrapped up in the whole damn thing, and so I really don't have any, I just can't say anything on it, because I don't believe that half of the mental illnesses that they're defining actually are mental illnesses. I think the only reason they exist is because they've defined them. Too many.
Yeah, there's a lot of psychobabble and that stuff. But I mean, there's people that you meet that there's just something not right there. I mean, just
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, we might have had better solutions 50 years ago, where we just locked them up in rubber rooms.
Well, that's a little fatalistic, but
well, at some point you got to say that somebody is doing nothing but being a destructive force in the world, and either you're going into a rubber room or a prison cell.
Yeah, rubber or concrete, take your pick.
well, it's interesting. I remember it's funny you said that about the prison cell. I remember years ago seeing a documentary on the Aryan Brotherhood, and there was the first guy to ever defect from it. That was the first guy to defect from it who sat on the commission. They call it the commission. He was explaining the rise to power in the 70s, and it was because they controlled the drug trade in the prison system. And he said, he goes 80 to 90% of everybody that's in prison, he goes, in one way or another, it's related to drugs.
That's a high percentage.
You know, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did the drugs put them in prison, or did their innate criminality get them addicted to drugs?
No, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I was just saying that because you said a rubber room or prison, and it just sparked the memory of that guy talking. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I never thought about it.
Well, you know what? It's where the addict goes eventually, because like the addict will they are just thumbing their nose at the whole world. Now, like I said at the beginning, it's like none of us wants to be held accountable for everything we've screwed up. Okay, I couldn't afford all the parking fines, but the difference is, do you recognize that you screwed up and hope for mercy, or do you refuse to acknowledge that you screwed up and, you know, I'm not wrong, it's the system that's wrong? Well, yeah, maybe once in a while that's true, and that the system does need to be shaken up and changed every so often. But if you are constantly finding yourself opposed to the system, you know, and not just like speeding, parking in no parking areas, shoplifting, you know, cheating people, lying, all the damn time, maybe the problem is you.
And are you willing to change or make a sacrifice to actually avoid doing whatever it is in the future? I think that's the core of the difference between somebody who says like I'm not wrong and somebody who actually takes responsibility, not just says it.
Now, if you guys are interested in a really good book on someone that defeated his addiction, you guys all know the band Guns N' Roses, right?
Yep.
That the bassist was his name, Duff McKagan. His autobiography was great. He was a terrible alcoholic and nearly drank himself to death, to the point where his pancreas literally ruptured and started to seep digestive enzymes into his abdomen, to the point where he was being eaten from the inside, you know. And they didn't even think he'd survive that, but that was his wake-up call. And the book is just fascinating. Plus, you learn a lot about Guns N' Roses, which is a band I really liked when I was a kid. But if anyone is interested in addiction, read his book and how he went from being, you know, totally physically fucked up to, like, you know, having the body of a fucking Greek god.
Yeah, I saw him once at a Velvet Revolver concert, and I guess he must have been cleaned up by that point, because he was jacked to the gills.
Yeah, and if you look at the way he looked, like, you know, when he played with Guns N' Roses, he looked like, you know, complete shit. I mean, this guy actually one time drank his own vomit to get drunk again.
Yikes. Wow.
If we're on the subject of like 80s rockers books, check out The Dirt by Motley Crue.
Okay. There was a lot of drug addicts in there.
You know,
dude, it's a pretty crazy book.
That's where it's like you've gone so far into pathetic that you come right back around to being awesome again.
Well, that's I'm just saying, like, that's how bad he was. And if this guy could clean up, but what did it for him was, I guess it was such the fear of death. Like, you know, a lot of times that is what will get, you know, people who stay clean. You know, what is it? It's like when they reach that point where they're like, you know, basically one more drink will kill you, and they have to get to that. I mean, not everybody. A lot a huge amount of people do, drink or drug themselves to death. But that's usually what it'll take, like, the quote unquote phrase hitting bottom, or is that something like that they say.
Well, you know what?
There seems to be some truth to that.
Let me talk on that for a second, because having been, of first front row seats on this. Now, to get just to offend Steele by getting nerdy, the abyss in the D&D multiverse setting, it actually has infinite levels going down, and that's the thing with hitting rock bottom, is that rock bottom is wherever you choose it to be, because you can always go lower. Okay, because even if you screw everything up, you wind up in prison. You can go lower. You can go a lot lower in prison, and you can keep going down as long as you want. So I've run into some addicts making the excuse that they need to hit rock bottom. It's like, no, you have hit rock bottom, except you won't admit it. So you're going to go down to the next level, and you're going to keep going down until you say, okay, well, I've made enough of a pit to dig myself out of now.
I think they have to feel it, like on some sort of level. Like, if I was just going by the Duff's book, that he, that fear of death and like that extreme pain he was in so much pain, he woke up with it, that he actually couldn't even reach for the phone. Like, he'd never felt pain like that in his life. And that put the fear of God in him, I guess. And, so I guess everybody defines it for themselves. What is rock bottom? Like, I remember reading, not reading, actually, it was an interview I saw with, what's that guy, that drummer? Was it Nikki Sixx? Is that the name of that guy, drummer, the 80s rock guy? Was he with Motley Crue, or?
I think Nikki Sixx was.
Yeah, Nikki Sixx was the bassist in Motley Crue, and the fucking man. He was the fucking man.
Well, he was. Who was? I thought it was him, but anyway, I don't know if. Oh yeah, yeah. He was a heroin addict.
Yeah, he was a junkie. Oh yeah, he was a big time junkie.
And he was telling a story about one time. So he OD'd on heroin, and went to the hospital and everything like that. And they literally. He said he actually had a near-death experience, but it didn't.
They actually reported that he was dead on the radio. This is like in London or Japan or something like that. But they reported that he was dead.
Yeah, he was like clinically, like he was like his heart had stopped the whole bit, and he, they brought him back. And then even after that, they brought him back. He goes out after that and then does heroin again, an even higher dose. And and then for whatever reason that didn't kill him. And I don't know exactly but that was the last time he shot up. And I don't know what made him stop. I didn't read it. I don't know if you wrote a book or anything. I'd be curious.
That's the book, The Dirt, that I'm talking about.
Like,
it has all that shit in it.
Excuse me. What made him stop shooting heroin?
I don't remember specifically, but basically the book has chapters written by each member of the band, including their managers, and they all have pretty funny and dark stories to tell. It's good. It's a good read. I suggest anyone should read it. It'll keep you entertained if nothing else.
No,
I think rock bottom is. It goes back to that quote from Matt Forney I started things off with, that the current war, the current struggle in our society is between those who acknowledge objective truth and those who refuse to. And rock bottom is when the addict finally acknowledges objective truth. It's when they finally stop being all doped up and feel the pain of hitting this latest level of patheity and say yes. And they admit it to themselves and decide to turn things around.
Right, but it is subjective in some sense to them, because each person has this different idea of like, what is a mess, what how fucked up is it that I have to stop, and you use the word feel. There has to be an emotional component in there where they actually have to feel like the better option is to stop doing it and go through the pain of recovering than to keep on the same path. There has to be an emotional component, and emotions by their very nature are subjective; they're not objective.
Well, the guy you mentioned whose pancreas was exploding, he could have easily said, "This isn't fair, I don't deserve this," and then drank more booze to kill the pain.
Yeah.
Instead, he said, "This hurts and I deserve it. I need to stop deserving this."
Again, that's what I kind of mentioned earlier about it being a subjective experience, or that everyone's own personality when going through something like this is going to be different. Some people might be predisposed to failure and going to the point where they die, and others might have, it might affect them differently, and they maybe recover. Like, that's why I was saying it's kind of a complex, compounded issue. It's a self-compounding problem.
Like Davis was saying earlier, you need to want to get better, right? And then you almost have to look at it as a aspect of free will, because if you look at it from a deterministic point of view, it's so complicated what would make somebody, or what situation needs to exist to make somebody want to get better, because it's not the same for each person. Could be
there's one other thing. I agree that you have to want it, but there's another thing: you have to believe that you can get better. And when that, I'm speaking specifically of my friend who jumped out the window. He had tried and failed so many times to stay clean. He no longer believed it was possible that he could live a clean life and have any sense of, a joy or a life worth living. He had to reach a point where he didn't believe that was possible. He wanted it. He just didn't believe it could happen.
Right, right.
Well, here's what frustrates me. I mean, I don't know him, okay? And I hate to speak on something I don't know. But he was saying that he couldn't feel joy. Well, or feel happiness. Well, suck it up. It's like you have to, like, when you say you have to choose to get better, it's you have to want to be yourself, as opposed to wanting to still be high without the consequences. You have to know, you have to learn who you are. It's like, I could be this blitzed out whatever, whether I'm addicted. And again, this goes for anything. It's not just drugs, social media addiction, porn addiction, television addiction, for crying out loud. How many people just rot their brains of television every night? You have
at least 4.
It's obviously I'm not addicted enough to television. You have to say that, no, I want to exist in the real world, even if the real world means pain, even if the real world means, I'm going to choose reality. I'm going to choose my ownership and my own decisions of life.
And for each person, they have to find whatever reason is worth it to do that, to justify the suffering.
Everyone has their own bottom.
And we all have to, you have to pick up your cross and carry it. You have to figure out what is worth suffering. And the drugs will say, hey, do these drugs, that's worth your shitty job, until you suffer all week so you can get high on the weekend. And that's just suicide. You have to decide what you're going to live for. What is the thing you add to the universe?
For some people, it's going to be, I want to stop what I'm doing so I feel better. Or it could be, I want what's best for my wife and kid so badly that it doesn't matter how I feel, or God, or whatever it might be.
And this is just, it goes back to that C.S. Lewis saying that if you aim for the stars, the earth gets tossed in the deal. But if you aim for the earth, you'll just face plant. You need to be living for something bigger than yourself, period. And if you are, then you wind up living a pretty good life most of the time.
Well, isn't that part of the whole recovery model? Like the idea of the group, like, these 12-step programs is belonging to a fellowship or whatever they call it. Like that's an integral part of the recovery thing.
Well, I know the AA does a lot of, there's a heavy emphasis on Christianity in that program. And the sad part is, you've got a lot of people who they can't do that, right? You're a hardcore atheist or you're a different religion. So AA, they get this, this negative reaction to it. But the point,
it's because it's antiquated and gay. That's why people don't like AA. I don't like AA.
Well, it's because the point isn't the Christianity. The point is to be working for something greater than yourself, whatever that may be. It's just you have to put a label on it. So AA has put Christianity on it because it was, you know, a part of a Christian country.
Well, and
well, I think the guys who founded it were probably Christian, right? I think that's probably why.
Yeah, I mean, it
Exactly.
was founded in like the 30s. Yeah, I don't know if that's the reason why there's the emphasis on it, but I think someone needs to come
Well, I mean,
around.
if they were Buddhists, it probably, if the guys who founded it were Buddhist, it would probably have a Buddhist, you know, whatever. I don't know.
Well, and you know, it's easier to explain Jesus to somebody compared to trying to explain the superordinate principle and show them Jordan Peterson lectures. You know, so you need a certain IQ and a certain interest level before you're listening to that. So, like the simpleton guy, the regular Joe Schmo, you're gonna be like, okay, here's Jesus, pick up your shit.
Well, I mean, you know, my feeling on AA is, I know it worked for at least some people I knew, you know, back in the day when I lived in New York. I know it worked for some people that were in it. So I'm like, hey, if it fucking works, hey, knock yourself out.
Yeah, it's the result.
Analysis. Basically, all treatment, all addiction treatment seems to work roughly as well as the rest of it.
Yeah, it's the same thing with like Scientology. There's a type of addiction treatment model based on Scientology.
They call it Purif.
What's it called?
Purif. Short for purification. Scientologists love to shorten words and talk like that. I used to know a kid who grew up in the Church of Scientology.
Okay, I never heard that name before. Okay, interesting. Yeah, but apparently there was a couple of Hollywood stars. I can't remember her name. Oh fuck, this bitch used to be popular years ago. She was on Cheers. She replaced Diane on Cheers. Christy Alley, I think was her name.
Yeah, that's her.
Yeah, and apparently she was a cokehead, and she got clean going through Purif or whatever it is, and you know she swore by it. You know, this is what saved me. You know, so I guess it doesn't really matter what.
She was bought out and paid to say that by the Church of Scientology. I guarantee you.
Well, okay, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what the backstory is, but
I don't know where I heard it. It might have been Peterson again, not long ago, said that basically L. Ron Hubbard was a mess and formed Scientology around self-help principles. A lot of it for almost himself. So it almost makes sense if there's a lot of self-help built into the.
This fucking guy had a ship of people living with him that were like his own personal slave cult on a boat. And that organization continues to this day, called the Sea Org, where you sign a billion-year contract. And I'm not joking. I'm not joking.
I saw there was a movie. You might be able to download it or get it off of YouTube. They keep pulling it down. It was called The Prophet. That was totally about him, but it was his parody. But they never said it was him because, you know, you can. Yeah, because there's, you know, well, the whole thing about Scientology was they would sue people, but not with the intent of necessarily winning, just to bankrupt you till you stopped, you know.
All right, well, so we've been doing for a couple of hours. I think we should probably wrap things up. You guys got any last thoughts?
No, I guess if anyone's addicted out there, then don't listen to the advice you heard in here and don't give up. And if you're like to Churchill quote, if you're in hell, keep walking, don't stop, don't give up.
Yeah, learn to be uncomfortable in your own skin for a long time.
And find something that's worth it to do better.
Pain is just weakness leaving your body. So, folks, this is my Patreon live stream. I'll be doing another one on Sunday, exclusive for my backers. And hopefully a few of you will decide to toss me a buck as well. And don't forget about the Beckloff's live stream tomorrow night. If you like this one, I'm sure you'll like that one. Christopher Cantwell, you know, go buy Aaron Clary's books, etc. You know, if you guys are paying, you're the customer. If you're not paying, you're the product. And so my final thoughts, folks, is, you know, take your daily kratom pills, be faithful to pain, and keep your snark clean if you want her to give you a BJ. This has been Davis Aurini and Roizzy Reader and John.
Thanks for listening.
Check out Roizzy Reader's channel down below. Thanks for listening, everybody. Aurini out.